Hey, deserving listeners, let's continue watching Tom and Tom being interviewed by Nick Viall. My dog is barking.
It's like necessarily, I mean, of course, the act of it is terrible, but I think a lot of people have done what you've done. I don't think you're the only person in the world who has cheated on their significant other, but I think it's just the way that you have handled it since.
Or just what you've said. Or how you come across.
Yeah.
Like as a friend, I told you, one time I said, do you understand why your critics still criticize you? And I was curious.
Ross, if you want me to be fucking honest,
Whatever.
I love.
Are you saying you weren't honest before? Yeah, no, I don't want you to be.
I love Ariana. I do. I really care about her. But like, this person fucking throughout our relationship talked to me like I was down here all the fucking time. And it's unfortunate that like my way of acting out against that was like...
I'm not going to say anything. I don't need to say anything. Let's just continue to watch.
Me also like just getting belittled all the fucking time. Like, dude. And I hate that.
I said this before. Is it possible? Yeah. Even the little bit that I observed, the data that I saw in the previous season, the reunion, I can't remember where they presented this, but there was some indication that she could be harsh or critical or something. Okay. And maybe belittling, maybe making him feel stupid or small. Yeah, I could see that. That doesn't mean it's okay to do what you did. Also, it was probably a dynamic between the two of them, meaning that Ariana, baseline isn't normally like that, but she will resort to that. She's responsible for that behavior if she does do that. But because of their dynamic, you can imagine he's not just like this with the Raquel thing. He is like this with everything. So imagine all the little things that as a couple, when you live together, especially, you have to negotiate around. Like, hey, did you pick up that thing? Or, hey, you left that thing out. And you would imagine that he would deny, right? And not show, and you're going to hurt each other's feelings sometimes, unfortunately. And do we think that he was forthcoming about that and remorseful about that, apologetic about that? Of course not. So that they both were doing this thing to each other. They're both to blame for a dynamic that probably developed over time where he would do this sort of thing and then she would just get flabbergasted and didn't know what to do. And there's a lot of different responses to that, but she would be overly critical. And then might be, because of the distance that was happening, she might just be critical to him for no reason because of her hurt and her anger. I can see that. I don't know that, of course. So, okay. But that doesn't mean it's okay to cheat and lie for months and months and months. And it's in line with what I was saying last season, that with people with passive-aggressive personality, which I'm not diagnosing them with, I don't know, but they will, in that scenario, feel a lot of hurt and a lot of anger, and they will, through a hidden vector, get back at this person. Now, one way to say it is that it's revenge, so through infidelity and lying. Another way to put it, a more charitable way of putting it, is that they unconsciously believe they're actually communicating their displeasure. Like, instead of saying, hey, it hurts my feelings when you are critical. You can't do that, because they learned when they were a child that if they said that, they would get abused even more. And so they have this fantasy that through cheating, which of course makes no sense, they're giving Ariana a chance to learn about his feelings so that she can stop doing that. Again, it doesn't make any sense, but that's the passive-aggressive perceptual distortion.
I hate to say it, but like, I acted out because I had such low self-worth. And somebody like Raquel, somebody who's in her 20s, like doing the essentially the fucking whipped cream fucking bikini thing, like to me, like in Varsity Blues, like I couldn't fucking like.
Okay, so I don't know what he's referring to. Was Ariana, is she an actress? Was she in the movie Varsity Blues? Isn't that with Vanderbeek? Anyway, and Schwartz is aghast, so I'm guessing that this makes no sense and is is incoherent and not related, but it's coherent to him. And like I said, this could be actually legitimately how he sees the world. And to him, he's like, hey, you don't understand. And what he could even be really saying is, you don't understand. My parents or my parent or my older sibling or someone in authority over me had been treating me unfairly in a systematic way that gave me no choice than to do something to express myself or to get out from underneath that. You don't understand. How come no one will listen to me? He might literally be coming 90% from that place, which would explain why it's so irrationally connected in his mind to this conversation. And then, and then he felt that way about Ariana because of what went on when again, this is all speculative. And the way he's talking, he's like, you don't understand. Why doesn't anyone understand? Because his perceptual distortion, and it's, with all personality disorders, they're typified by the perceptual distortion. For people with borderline, the person with borderline will text you. This is just one potential manifestation, and you will be at work and you don't even see the text and you don't text them back. The person with borderline will perceive that as not only just a rejection that you are communicating by not texting back immediately, but that you never liked them. You've never loved that. Maybe you're married to that person. You never loved them. You always hated them, and no one will ever love them. No one will ever be there. It goes to an extreme, and it'll feel that way to them, especially at the severe end of the spectrum. They text you, you don't text back, and that's exactly how they will feel. So there's the data that's coming in to their perceptual senses of, there's an hour since I texted last. That's the fact, right? But it's filtered through the traumas, and then the distress kicks in, right? And the person with borderline, they don't have any control over that until they get a lot of treatment, and there's a lot of awareness and a lot of measures in place and a lot of corrective experiences, a lot of healing. So for people with passive aggressive, all the data that's coming in, the factual data, gets filtered through the schema of, I am being mistreated and suppressed by a tyrant, and I have no options. There is no way to assert myself. There's no point in trying to deal with them, and I'm being treated horribly. Now, like I said, it's possible that if we were a fly on the wall watching their relationship, there might have been times when we would have said, Ariana, you're taking it a little far. I get your frustration, but that was particularly pointed and harsh or something. So people with these disorders often will find someone that has tyrant tendencies, maybe even abusive tendencies, but at the very least, they tend to have that reactivity. They notice it in the beginning of the dating process, and subconsciously they're like, oh, this will be good because it will be much easier for me to uphold my schema if the person actually exhibits behavior that is at least in the direction of how I see the world, right? And then they repeat this relationship, and they end up, people with passive aggressive personality, they end up just going from tyrant to tyrant, and different kinds of tyrant, because there's different types of how to be a tyrant. You can be a tyrant by being very critical, be a tyrant by being abusive. You can be a tyrant by being distant.
Like I was like, wow, I have really, like, oh my God, like I'm attractive to somebody. Like, I'm serious. Like,
I get all that.
This might be construed as you saying she made me cheat. That's
No,
not. That's
she
not
didn't.
what
She
you
didn't.
don't want to
I'm
be
not
that
saying-
guy.
Schwartz again, stepping in because he is reading the room, and you see Schwartz even look to Nick and like kind of gauge where Nick is coming from. Nick has a smirk on his face, which is like, yeah, I get it. And Nick is probably, as a podcaster, I mean, I've never been in these shoes, but I could imagine Nick thinking, this is golden. This is perfect, because he's hanging himself out to dry on my podcast. And so there's going to be a lot, like, this video has almost 500,000 views. Anyway, so Schwartz is looking at Nick. Nick is like, oh yeah, I know that. Schwartz is like, okay, I have to do something. And Schwartz says, well, you have a lot of remorse. We understand that, right? It's interesting how I wonder how much of Sandoval's problem, probably not a significant portion, but essentially what Schwartz is doing is enabling. I think some of you might even be thinking that. The codependent, the overfunctioner, one of the things that they often will do as a side effect of their personality and their issues is that they will enable. They might even, as I was saying in an earlier video, they might even really need the underfunctioner to stay underfunctioning. And so one of the ways to do that is to never really confront, never really try to help them change the underfunctioner. So enabling is something that we're usually talking about when you have someone that has an addiction, right? And so the codependent, the enabler, will do things to enable. And one of the things that they'll do to enable is they will be a cushion or a buffer between the person with a substance use problem and the consequences of their behavior, right? So a classic is that the wife of the alcoholic husband, so the husband wakes up in the morning, he's really hungover and he can't go to work. And so she, or even still drunk, and she calls work and says he's sick today. So that's enabling. It's understandable for a lot of reasons, but it's preventing the individual with the problem from experiencing the full weight of the consequences, and often change occurs after people experience the full weight, hitting bottom, that kind of stuff. They are forced to look at something, they're given a really good opportunity to go, okay, well, something's wrong here. But if you buffer, then they don't face that and they just continue with the pattern. So with Schwartz, by him buffering this, it could be actually perpetuating the problem, because for Sandoval, he isn't experiencing the full weight of the consequences. And God knows what's happening behind the scenes. Schwartz could be doing all sorts of things to help him and enable him by making excuses for him or whatever. And so Sandoval is left not feeling the full weight of the consequences. Now, I don't think that anybody could be a buffer between Sandoval and all the consequences. So I'm guessing most of the consequences are still happening to Sandoval. But, and really, I wonder what else is going on in Sandoval's life. Is he still with Raquel? It sounds like he's dating someone else. Is that person enabling? Are the producers enabling? Are other people enabling? And I hadn't thought about this, but undoubtedly, strangely, but undoubtedly, there's probably thousands upon thousands, millions potentially, of fans of Sandoval's that on a daily basis are commenting or DMing him and saying, you did the right thing. I had a tyrant of a spouse too. And so that's enabling as well, right?
You don't want to be. I know per our conversations.
No, not at all.
It sounds a little bit like that right now. Just so you know.
Right. So Schwartz is saying, yeah, it kind of sounds like you're blaming Ariana, but I know that's not what you're saying. And then Sandoval takes oh yeah, I'm not saying that at all. That's what you're saying. You've said it multiple times just in this interview. You've said it many times in the past. You're still saying it. Now, if he had said that and exhibited that he felt all sorts of remorse, or at least even a shred of remorse, and he said this, then okay. But in the absence of any remorse and any sorrow, and he keeps coming back to, you don't understand how much of a tyrant she was, it doesn't look good.
Yeah, it does sound like that. I'm just saying, I'm letting you know.
You're talking about somebody who she wouldn't have sex with me for fucking a year.
Yeah, no, yeah, I get all that.
Dude,
and I've been in
sucks.
toxic relationships before.
But I loved Ariana. I really fucking did. And the whole process of breaking up with her, this happened over.
Even though Schwartz was trying to save him, he continues, and then the no sex thing. Yeah. Those are viable concerns or complaints. It's like someone saying, I got fired from my job. You don't understand. I couldn't pay my bills. That's why I killed those people and took their money. What else was I supposed to do?
4 months. This wasn't I don't know, man. I don't know what to say.
Is there a point when you look back and reflect on what you would have done differently?
Yes.
Hold on.
So I think it's really futile for Nick. Maybe Nick knows this, but I just can't imagine anything productive happening from this question. So let's see what he says.
Let me finish the rest of the question. Was there a moment where you realized this was the moment I should have brought into the relationship?
That moment was probably, a year before we broke up.
Okay.
It just was like,
Yeah. Well, that question and that answer isn't too difficult for him to answer. And also, it doesn't get at the core of the issue. Yeah, whatever. He thought that he should break up. And maybe Nick is leading to, okay, well, then why didn't you?
I woke up before her, went to sleep after her, wake up and like make her a dumpling latte. I instigated the happiness in the relationship. Always. I was the fucking only one, man.
So if it wasn't reciprocated, why not break up?
Because it's not that fucking easy.
But that's
You're with somebody for
where-
9 fucking years. You don't like.
Sometimes
you're
the
like, why
right
is it-
decision is hard, Tom.
Great. Thank you. I get it. It's fucking hard.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, he started out, Sandoval, in this very subdued with his sunglasses on inside. And he was being careful with his words. Now I think he's raw because it's all been stripped away fairly easily, by the way. And he feels backed up into a corner. And I legit believe he has nothing to offer. He knows he's being judged. He knows that he's not saying the right things, or he knows other people think he's not saying the right things. And he just keeps going back to the same bullet points that he's been saying ever since this was found out last year. And so, he's continuing to do that.
Really hard. And I didn't know how to fucking handle it. I didn't know. I fucking handled it wrong. I know I did. I fucking know I did, man. I fucked up.
What is this that Ariana is now suing you?
Oh, she's not suing me.
Oh, clear it up, because that's what...
Right, so Nick's getting off of the main point, which I think is good, because I think all avenues have been exhausted, so now we're getting to some other story.
Down payment.
And then you split the assets 50-50.
Yeah.
So you both own half of it legally.
Yes.
Okay. And then
So
you
I-
offered her $3 million.
3.1.
3.1.
3.1.
Okay, so now they're talking about some dispute, really very common during a divorce. I'm guessing what happened was that the house appreciated over time, but because Sandoval wants to keep it, they can't put it to the test in terms of exactly what the house would sell for, right? So there has to be appraisals and speculation. And often what will happen is each lawyer will have their own loyal appraisers who appraise the house in the direction of their client. And so there's a lot of difference between that, potentially millions of dollars. And so they're in a dispute about that. Pretty common.
As someone who can empathize or show compassion for people and think to themselves, you know what, in this moment,
I've told my friends to please speak up if I'm ever being a fucking dick.
Okay.
And they have. When you're on a reality show, as you know, you get used to like people like wanting to know about you and everything that's happening with you.
So he's saying that he has asked people around him to confront him about his dickish behavior. Right. I mean, I don't know what that says exactly, but Nick is asking a good question. Okay, how are you learning how to not be selfish? I'm guessing on a, well, I don't know. I wonder what everyone would say around Tom if he is frequently selfish about a lot of things, or if he's only selfish when push comes to shove, or he's only selfish in kind of select situations. I have people close to me that are like this because of the traumas that they went through, that generally speaking, they can be very generous and sweet and compassionate and have empathy. But when they're pushed into a corner, meaning that they're not actually pushed into a corner, but they perceive the situation as themselves being pushed into a corner, they will act in very and extremely selfish ways and hurtful ways as a defense. They sort of rely on this way of perceiving and acting that they had to rely on when they were young. So I'd be curious as to which is true for him. I haven't heard much. Schwartz would probably say that he is not selfish generally, but I wonder what everyone would say, because, there's a possibility that he frequently is hurtful and selfish and self-centered, not in the narcissistic way, but in the passive-aggressive, or at least the lack of having the ability to self-reflect or know what's happening. Like he was late at the beginning. And for some people, like let's say you take a fictional person who is being asked to come on a podcast, let's say that. So they're asked by a friend, hey, come on my podcast. They don't really have, because when they were young, they weren't allowed to do this. They don't really have an ability to really assess if they want to or not. So they agree to it. And they also have a defense of just pleasing everyone around them. And so they say, yeah, I'll come on the podcast. And they don't really think if they want to or even if they have the time. Then when they look at their schedule, they see that there are other things. They've double booked themselves. And because of their perceptions and because of their distress of bothering other people, they don't want to impose themselves, or they don't want to disappoint someone. They'll say, well, I'll figure it out. And then they just avoid, because they have to disappoint one of two people, because they've made appointments with two different things, right? And it's so intolerable for them to disappoint someone that they ignore it, or they distract themselves, or they say, I'll figure it out later. They just put it off, procrastinate. The day comes and now they have to face it, and they just freeze. They don't know what to do. So they just avoid and do what he did, which is just to not show up, right? I don't know if this was the scenario, but I know people like this. I've treated people like this. I have people like this in my personal life. And you might even say, hey, where are you? And because they're panicking, they'll start lying. They'll be like, oh, I'm almost there, or something along those lines. Or we never made this appointment, or whatever. And, if you're on the receiving end of that, it's like, well, a month ago, I asked you if you wanted to be on the podcast, and you said yes. And so now I'm being blamed, like I'm being treated like I'm a tyrant. What happened here? But it's that perception, right? So, there's a lot of pathways to being selfish, is my point. I think the perception online is that selfish people are narcissistic, whatever they mean by that. I don't think when people say that he's a narcissist, I don't think it's connected to any psychological concept. I think it's just another word for an asshole or something. But I hope it demonstrates that people can be selfish, not because they're like, ha ha ha, I'm in it for myself. They commit selfish acts because of their traumas are resulting in them perceiving the world in weird ways that produces a lot of terror for them that they don't know what to do with, right? And then the end result is selfishness and blame and harm to other people.
And I'm like, hey, I know that I'm going through shit, and like I'm talking about my fucking self, and what's going on with you? What's going on with you? Please tell me. That's what I've done with my friends. Kyle Chan, Schwartz, like I really have.
Yeah. Wait, that was sincere.
That was sincere.
Yeah.
So if you were to be maybe in this scenario again, where you're,
I'll never be in this scenario.
Right. So it's very consistent, which is kind of nice because it's easier to analyze or to comment on. He has a set of things that he says, and it's consistent with people that I've treated before in the early phases of this problem. He's saying, no, I'll just never, it'll never happen. It's like that mode that you go into is just like, I don't know how to deal with this, and I have no way to even know where to begin. So I will just say it will never happen. I will make sure it never happens. But that is a sure way for it to happen. Now, will it happen exactly like this in the future? Yeah, who knows? It could, but it could also manifest in a thousand other ways other than having infidelity. There's a lot of other ways to have the problem express itself in a relationship.
Yeah.
Wow.
I spent 4 months in therapy with her, and I really I wanted it to be, I had like an image of it ending well, and I was fucking delusional. I really did. Like, she knew this was ending. Spent months. She knew this was ending. This is not like a surprise.
Was there a part of you that...
Okay, so he's talking about how during the affair, he went to 4 months of couple therapy with Ariana, and he's saying she knew it was ending. I don't know. I think it's, given the way Ariana was talking, I was under the impression that Ariana knew that they had issues, but didn't think the relationship was just going to end anytime soon, and also for sure didn't know that he was having a very significant affair with Raquel, with one of her friends. So I think he's saying that to himself to justify what happened. She do, like Raquel and Sandoval would say that. It's like, she had to have known. I mean, therefore, she is complicit in the infidelity because she didn't do anything about it, because she wanted out of the relationship to herself. That's quite a twisted way of rationalizing things.
I thought maybe in therapy was a time to.
And by the way, I have heard that from people before. It's more common than you might think that as people are having an affair, one of the ways that they will justify it is they will say, well, my partner has to know. They're not stupid. I'm sending all these signals. There's so many signs. And sure, are there situations where that's true? Yes. But the times that I've seen people say this is not the case. There's no evidence of that. They believe it. They convince themselves of it because it makes them feel better. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Tune in next time when I continue watching. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do. You do.